My name is Mike Sorvillo. I'm a product manager on the Hangouts Chat bot framework. I'm here today with Wesley, one of our G Suite developer advocates, and Chuan, the technical lead for the Hangouts Chat bot framework. So today we're going to talk about how you can transform your workplace with the Hangouts Chat bot framework. And just a quick agenda. I'm going to give some background about the new Hangouts Chat and the bot's user experience in case you guys have never tried the product before. I'm going to pass it off to Wes and Chuan to talk about the bot framework and API and show you a ton of code samples and demos before I wrap it up. So a quick show of hands. How many people in the room use Hangouts today in Gmail or on mobile? Awesome. So what you might not know is that millions of businesses use Hangouts today for direct messaging or lightweight group messaging with their company. And what we've heard from these companies is that they're looking for a more persistent place for their teams to collaborate and communicate. So this past February, we launched the new Hangouts Chat. It's currently available for G Suite customers at no additional charge. It's a brand new tech stack with apps on macOS, Windows, Android, iOS, and web. It's global out of the gate, so it works in 28 languages and is accessible on all major screen readers on all major platforms. And really the backbone of the new Hangouts Chat are rooms, a way to center the conversation around a team, a project, an event, basically anything you want. And it's obvious when you're working on a project, you're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. I'm sure everyone in the room has experienced this if you've used group messaging before. You maybe are talking about something important, something at work, about work, and then all of a sudden someone in the message is like, hey guys, what do you want for lunch today? And then the work keeps going on, and that's great, but then all of a sudden someone else, who's probably hungry, says, I want Mexican. So when this happens, it's really hard to just figure out what's happening and what's the conversation we should be focused on. So conversations in rooms are threaded to prevent this exact problem. Threading helps you separate the everyday chit-chat from all of the important stuff. And not only that, you can segment the important stuff by different threads to keep context around those conversations. If you use Google Groups for email lists or identity management at your company, you can add a Google Group to a room, and then anyone in the room can also join the room. Over time, these rooms are going to contain all the things you've talked about, all the files you've shared, so everything's fully indexed and searchable, and you can look for file type, keyword, person, look in one room, many rooms, basically however you remember what you're looking for. Hangouts Chat has deep integrations into G Suite, so you can pick any docs or Drive file from the Drive file picker, and anytime you paste a Drive file or a docs file, a link to it, we will render a thumbnail and help you grant access to everybody in the room. And if you find yourself going back and forth too much with someone or writing blocks and blocks of text, we help you with one click up the bandwidth of the conversation by creating a video meeting with our sister product, Hangouts Meet. So anyone in the room can jump in the meeting and you can resolve what you wanted to resolve faster. So you're all no stranger to conversational interfaces. We saw some pretty amazing things from the assistant team yesterday at the keynote. And bots at the workplace, what they're really meant to do is help you blend conversation and tools to accelerate your work and reduce all that context switching that happens when you're working with a bunch of different tools at work. You can talk to a bot privately in a one-on-one direct message, or you can add a bot to a room, and then anyone in the room can @mention it to do something. And while you can take anything and make it a conversational interface, you could literally take a 12-page form and make it a conversational interface. We really think conversational interfaces shine for three main use cases at the workplace. One is asynchronous notifications. So in this use case, something happens in a third-party app, and a notification gets plumbed into the room where everyone can start a conversation about it. Another is one-off actions. So in this case, maybe you're talking about someone about what you need to do, and then you say, hey, project management bot, create a task about this item, and it does that. And the third is querying for information. So with this use case, there's data, obviously, in the third-party app, and you just want to find it. So you say, project management bot, what are Mandy Tiller's tasks? And it shows you what the tasks are. One of our big mantras on the Hangouts Chat team is that bots are people too. They live alongside people, and there's no heavy installation flow. Nothing more to learn. If you know how to start a direct message with someone, add someone to a room, @mention someone, you know how to get started with a bot. Google launched a few bots of their own. One is the Meet bot that uses natural language processing and machine learning to schedule a meeting and book a room for everybody in the room. Another is the Google Drive bot that notifies you when new files are shared with you, new comments are made, or when people request access to your files. And not only can you see when people request access, but you can actually grant access from the bot itself. In fact, in the 2 months since launching, what we've seen is that people typically grant access to files with the Google Drive bot 8 times faster than they do with email. So think about that. You can actually speed up a common workflow for any app that you build by 8 times. We have a number of third-party bots like Trello to stay informed about your project's progress without leaving the chat room. RingCentral to make calls or start video conferences with your room and your team. Jira, so you can get notified about changes to issues, tasks, bugs, and then talk about those changes as they happen. And we're excited to announce today that Box is launching a bot on Hangouts Chat to help you find recent files or favorite files to open or share without switching context. We have a number of bots in many different business functions, like developer tools, tasks, CRM, HR, support, and more. So now I'm going to pass this over to Wes and Chuan to talk a bit about the bot framework and API.
Great, thanks, Mike. All right, we're here to guide you on this comprehensive tour for the bot framework for Hangouts Chat. So what we just saw from Mike are a bunch of public bots written by others. Well, they're available for everyone. But what I want you guys to think about is writing bots on your own, whether it be for your organization, for your customers, or the world. Write a public bot like the others that you've seen. But maybe you're new to bots and you're kind of like hesitating, going, how hard is it? But you know what? Put simply, it's not that bad. Just think of bots as like microservices. They're simpler, there's less code, and you don't have to write a complete web app or mobile app. You don't have that complexity. So less code means you can build your apps quicker. But how quick? Well, the Motorola CIO got a demo bot up in less than an hour, then of course spent a bit more time to do one for real work. What does it do? It talks to multiple systems, and it gathers customer order and device warranty information to present to perhaps the customer service agent who needs this information when they're on a call. The main idea is that humans used to have to log into each of these systems separately, by hand collate all that information before they could tell their customer. But now with the bot, you could summarize all these results from all these different systems together in a single room so that all the CSRs can see this at the same time. So more in the blog post, but we're here to help get you started. All right, well, building quickly isn't the only standout feature of Hangouts Chat. We want to emphasize that the platform has a lot of flexibility. There's many different ways to implement and host your bots. So we're going to go over some of the basics and then walk you through each option that you see here. All right, so a quick review, talking to APIs and then comparing that with bots. So in this diagram, we have an application. We need to try and reach an API. The data is protected behind OAuth. And so what typically has to happen is the user has to grant access to your application through OAuth. You guys have seen that little dialog window, right? And once that happens, then the app is able to reach the API, access that user's secure data on their behalf, do all the work that it needs to, and then responds back to the user, right? Everybody familiar with this? Okay, great. So with bots, it's a little bit different, all right? It's kind of a 3-tier architecture here. And what happens is, instead of a request coming from an application, the request really comes from a user in a chat room. All right, they enter, I want to talk to this bot, I'm going to send it this payload, so that message gets entered into Hangouts Chat. Then Hangouts Chat contacts your bot does all the work it needs to do, collates the information, and then returns that information back to Hangouts Chat, which then renders that result in the chat room. Okay, so it's a little bit different. The key takeaway here is that for your regular apps, you call APIs, but with bots, Hangouts Chat calls you. All right, so noodle on this for a moment, and once you kind of grok this, then the implementation path that you are going to take is going to be more clear, and you can build your bots faster. All right, now the most efficient bots are, return plain text because it's short, it's fast, and it gets the job done. But for a better user experience, Hangouts Chat supports richer UIs called cards. that allow you to structure your response data. For example, if you look at the card sample here, you can see that your bot could have returned 5 lines of plain text and done its job. But this UI card is more pleasing visually. In fact, it can communicate more than just plain text. For example, you can see that there's a visual cue to show that 2 of the 5 tasks have been completed, from this project management bot that's managing one of your reports. Right? So that visual cue is really helpful, and if you were to do that in plain text, you'd have to add some extra symbols, which may get in the way of the data that's coming back. Right? So cards are great. We'll look at them a little bit more later. Now, if you already have an app with data that's kept secure behind OAuth, you can still expose some of your app functionality within Hangouts Chat. Our auth and config flow lets your users log into your app directly from Hangouts Chat. Now, it's similar to this example where you see the task tracker bot, which stores information in a Google Sheet. Well, the sheet is protected data, right? So the user has to allow your bot access to that spreadsheet. And then once the auth flow is complete, then users can now access your app and their secure data directly from Hangouts Chat rooms and direct messages. All right, before showing you the code, I want to give you a quick rundown of the event types that Hangouts Chat sends to your bot. So your bot can take action when it is, for example, added to a space. This is a great place to send a welcome message like, hey, thanks for adding me to this room. Here's how to use me. It also can take action when it's removed from a space, like logging things or doing some kind of cleanup business logic. The most common event type is message, which is just when a bot receives a normal message entered by a user in a room or DM. And then the last one is card clicked, which is when a user clicks on one of the UI card elements that we just looked at earlier. So to keep things simple, we're going to focus on the latter pair. All right, let's start with standard bots that are running over HTTP. As mentioned before, the development environment is quite flexible. Bots can be created and hosted on any platform. In other words, your language, your stack, your cloud, or ours, right? So I presented at the top here, some Google Cloud Platform or GCP products and Firebase products that you could use, but you don't have to. All right? So Hangouts Chat also works with bot-related environments like Dialogflow and HuBot. We'll demo some bots in some languages that you see here, but it really doesn't matter. As long as the Hangouts Chat service can HTTP post to your bot, that's all that's really necessary. All right, are you guys ready for your hello world? We're going to start with the Echo bot, and happy to pass it off to Chuan, who's the engineering lead for the Hangouts Chat bot framework.
All right, thank you. Hi, let's switch to the demo, please. All right, can everybody see my screen? Great. Cool. So for those of you who haven't used Hangouts Chat before, what you're seeing right now on my screen is the macOS desktop app for Hangouts Chat. So on the left, you'll see a list of rooms and direct messages that I'm a member of. And on the right, you'll see a message stream. So I can scroll up a little bit. You can see the group conversations and so on. All right. And of course, I can create a new conversation here. All right. So let's take a look at a very basic bot. I'm going to call it the Echo bot, which simply writes back whatever the user sends to it. So I'm going to talk to it here. Echo bot, hi. And it's going to say hi back to me. All right, cool. So you saw that the way I talk to a bot is by mentioning it in a message. So in rooms, only messages that directly mention a bot get sent to the corresponding bot. So the rest of your conversation with your team is private. This is not the only way you can talk to a bot. You can also have a direct message, a one-on-one direct message with the bot. So here you can see I already have a direct message with the Echo bot as well. And here you can see I don't have to mention the Echo bot at all. Every message I say in this direct message is going to be sent to this bot because that's the only other person in this direct message. Cool. So now that we've seen how you could interact with the Echo bot in Hangouts Chat, let's take a look at how it's built. Let's go back to the slides.
All right, so here's the Echo bot in full glory in Python. This example uses the popular Flask web framework, which is hostable on App Engine, Compute Engine, or really any cloud supporting Python web apps. As you can see from the top of the function there, Hangouts Chat posts to slash, and then the code scans the JSON payload for the message type, and then it returns the same message string along with the user and the username of whomever called the bot, just like in Chuan's demo that you just saw. Now, Python isn't the only choice. For example, maybe you have a mobile app and you're using Firebase. Well, if all of your code is on Firebase, you don't really necessarily want to host your bot on something completely different, right? It's perfectly fine. So here's the same bot in Node.js and hosted by Cloud Functions for Firebase. If instead most of your backend is on GCP, then you can host it on the sister product, Google Cloud Functions. The code would be nearly identical. So if you take a look at the code here, it does pretty much the same thing as all the others. It scans the inbound message for message event, then it returns the username and string as before, and it really doesn't matter to Hangouts Chat that your code is in JavaScript or Python and hosted on Cloud Functions for Firebase or Google Cloud Functions. Remember, Hangouts Chat only knows how to HTTP post to your bot. All right, so how are you guys doing so far? Want to see more code? All right. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk a bit about Google Cloud PubSub. So what is it? Many of you know that it's a real-time event streaming and messaging system where you can have many producers and consuming, reading and writing, and probably at different rates. And all, of course, could be coming from different applications. But what does this have to do with Hangouts Chat? Well, the platform is supposed to be flexible, right? What if you decide to host your bot on-premise and behind a firewall? Well, in this case, Hangouts Chat cannot contact your bot. So what can you do? Well, this is the perfect use case for PubSub. Hangouts Chat sends a message to PubSub instead of your bot because it can't reach it. Your bot has to register a pull subscription, which allows the bot to get the Hangouts Chat messages from PubSub and bring it through the firewall. And then your on-premise bot can service the request, do all the calls it needs to do, gathers up all the information, and then responds back to Hangouts Chat like normal. All right, let's see how to use it. So the next example is the Java version of the Echo bot, okay, because a lot of enterprises use Java, and so we want to show an example in this language as well. So like Python and Node, you can see that the code handles the event, it scans for message type, and then replies to Hangouts Chat with a message text and username. It's just like the others, but perhaps maybe a tiny bit more verbose, right? Well, that's great, but what if this bot is in our corporate data center behind that firewall? Well, we just mentioned a minute ago that PubSub is the right solution. So how do we tweak our bot code to work with PubSub? Well, turns out it's not too bad. So if you look over here, you can see the extra code that we added to our Java Echo bot that uses Object Mapper to convert between JSON and Java objects. It's then able to get the message from PubSub and convert it to JSON for processing. It passes that event object to the handle method that we saw on the previous slide, which then handles the message as if it was sent via HTTP post from Hangouts Chat. It doesn't know the difference. All right, so that's awesome. All right, so we discussed hosting on Google's cloud, your cloud, with or without a firewall. Let's bring it back inside Google with a little twist called Google Apps Script. But first things first, quick quiz. How many of you feel it's important to have auth to help keep your users' data secure? Right? Yeah, me too. Now, how many of you like writing auth code? Yeah, chirp, chirp, chirp. Yeah, that's what I thought. What about managing your own servers or VMs on-premise or in the cloud? Not easy either, right? So in that case, AppScript is for you. Have you heard of AppScript before? How many of you have heard of AppScript before? A couple of you. That's good, but not enough. It's kind of like another Google secret, but just not a good one because we launched it almost a decade ago. So what is it? It's a customized JavaScript environment where we take care of the servers and auth. And you have access to more than 40 G Suite and Google APIs with just function calls. Now, if you try to build a bot with it, we actually provide you a one-click bot template so that you're already given a basic working bot to hack on right away. Check out the video if you want to learn more about this secret. All right, so AppScript is a serverless environment for all developers, including sometimes developers, like all you product folk, business analysts, and data scientists out there. Now, here's the @Echo bot in AppScript. Now, let's pause for a minute here. Really look at this code. While it's identical in functionality as the others, it's only one line of code. One line, right? And not only that, it's the easiest way to deploy a bot within your organization. All right, so the Echo bot is a good start, but Chuan, can you show us a more useful AppScript bot?
Sure. All right. So just like the Echo bot, we're going to show you a very quick bot that takes in the user input, but instead of just returning it verbatim, we're going to do a little twist. We're going to translate it. Okay. So let's switch to demo. Already here. All right, so I've called it the translate bot. And I'm going to say, welcome to Google I/O in English. And it's going to give us back the same message, but in Japanese. Cool. So let's take a look at how that's built. Let's go back to the slides, please. OK, here it is. Notice how it's almost as simple as the Echo bot. The only difference is that we're now calling the Google Translate API. And how do we call the Google Translate API? It's just a function call away, right? You're not importing an SDK, you're not downloading anything, it's just there. And you can see how it's very intuitive to use. You pass it the message the user sent. In this case, it's e.message.argument text, argument text being the text the user sent without the bot's own name in it. And you pass it the source language and the target language, and then you return the result as text. That's it. It's almost too simple, right? Let's take a look at a more advanced example. Cool. So let's go to the demo again. Thank you. So in preparation for this talk, our team has been using Google Spreadsheets to track our work. Okay, so each of us has some task assigned, and I built a simple bot to take a look at where everyone's at in terms of their tasks. So I call it the task tracker bot. So I'm going to call it here. OK. OK, so it looks like we have a bunch of tasks pending here. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet. OK. Yeah, can you guys see the spreadsheet? OK. So you can see this is a plain Google spreadsheet. I have the first row with the column names and a bunch of tasks here, assignee and status. So you can see the bot is really pulling the data from the spreadsheet. It's showing the tasks that are not yet completed. So I'm going to mark all of these as completed right now, since we're all already standing on the I/O stage. I'm going to mark everything as completed, and I'm going to go back to the chat app. I'm going to query it again through my task tracker bot. And this time, it's going to tell us that there are no more tasks. Hooray.
Video's coming soon, by the way.
Cool. All right, let's go to the slides. All right, so this is the code. This is the code for the task tracker bot. And you can see it fits on one slide, so it's really not that complicated. You can see we're doing some processing here. We're opening up the spreadsheet by spreadsheet app.openById. We're grabbing the data from the spreadsheet in a two-dimensional array. We're doing a little bit of processing here, removing the first row, which is just the column names, filtering out the rows that are already completed, mapping each row into a string, putting them together into a message, and then returning them to Hangouts Chat.
What? I don't see any auth or API calls here.
That's a very good question, Wes. So notice how, in terms of API calls, just like the translate bot, all the API calls are just function calls. It's just spreadsheet app.openById, spreadsheet get data range, get values, get URL. That's it. Like you're not doing complicated. You're not building REST requests or using SDK. You just call them as if they're built in. And in addition, you don't have to write any explicit authentication code, right? So obviously, this spreadsheet is visible, it's ACLed, right? It's not publicly visible, but because I've used this bot before, I have given access to it, and Google App Script is responsible for handling all of that. You don't have to write an OAuth callback, you don't have to store the OAuth tokens, you don't have to refresh them. It's all taken care of by App Script. So after the user logs in for the first time, App Script will take care of it. All right. So far, the bots you've seen collect data and return them in plain text. But let's take a look at how to present a richer UI in the form of cards.
Great. Well, it's true that plain text is the easiest and fastest, but for the cards, but you got to use cards to make your response look good, right? So that's what this is for. So you can use JSON markup to construct the UI card. And the best part is that it's write once, run anywhere. Web, iOS, Android, they're all covered. You don't need to write a separate mobile version of your bot. Cards can be interactive, like the poll you see here. Users interact by clicking on the vote button. Cards are also updatable, So when users submit votes, the bar chart and the vote comp, they update. Now, the user experience would be much worse if a new card was generated for every vote, right? The bot framework supports a variety of widgets. So here are a couple to get an idea, like buttons, formatted text, structured data, images, links, and more. But really, the widgets are just building blocks. The real magic is when you put them all together and assemble them into cards, whether they're interactive, updating, or both. All right, so Chuan, let's see a demo of a bot that has interactive and updating cards.
All right. Cool. Let's go to the demo. Great. Thank you. Cool. So it's a great day here today at Shoreline Amphitheater. How many of you have been to Shoreline Amphitheater before? OK, some of you. OK. So that's more than I expected, actually. But for the rest of you, I just wrote a little bot that helps us find Shoreline Amphitheater on Google Maps. So I call it the Where Is bot. And I'll just use it like this. So where is Shoreline Amphitheater? And what this bot does is pull up a map of that shows Shoreline Amphitheater, and it shows an image of the map.
I don't see any amphitheater there.
All right. On the bottom, you can see a row of buttons, and guess what happens?
I don't see it still. Oh, wait, there it is.
There it is. So the plus button zooms in, and the minus button zooms out. And so we can see the Bay Area in all of its glory. Okay.
What's that Google Maps icon down there?
All right. So when you click on this button, on web, it will take you to the Google Maps site centered on the location I typed. And on mobile, it will, of course, take you to the Google Maps app. Cool. Would you like to see how this is built? Let's go back to the slides. Great. Cool. So here's first, we're going to start with our familiar onMessage function. So as you guys already know, the onMessage function is invoked when the user sends a message to the bot. In this case, I said, where is Shoreline Amphitheater, right? So its job is to return the card. But in this case, we're going to move the logic for constructing the card into a new function we're going to show called buildMessage. But just note here that buildMessage takes in 3 arguments. It takes in the location the user typed, right? This is argument text trim, so remove the space, right? And it's going to take an initial zoom level, and it's going to take in a 3rd parameter, which is the response type. So when a new message is sent, we want to send a new message always. So so we use the new message type. We'll take a look at that later. So now let's look at buildMessage, right? This is kind of the meat of the code. As you saw before, it takes in the location that the user typed, it takes initial zoom level, and it takes in the response type. So what we're going to do in buildMessage is that we're going to construct each element or each widget inside this card in sequence. So we start with the header. As you can see, just like the header, the other widgets are the same. All of these widgets are represented by a plain JavaScript object. And the header has 2 properties. There's a title, and it has an icon. Okay. So next, we're going to build the image from Google that we see here, the map image. We'll take a look at how that's built in the next slide. And then we'll construct a row of buttons that you see on the bottom. So note that here we're going to have creating 2 more functions, build Google Maps link, which is taking just the location. And we're going to build, we're going to have a function called build button, which takes in the label, the location, and the target zoom level that the user will be taken to when they click the button. So finally, we're going to put it all together into one big JSON object. And we return this object back to Hangouts Chat, and that creates the card. So let's look at each of these widgets. So first, let's look at build image. Right. It shows a widget from an image from Google Maps in an image widget. So in this example, we're going to use the Google Maps API, which you might notice is again built into AppScript. We just say maps.newStaticMap. We set a bunch of parameters, like what the location zoom level. We add a marker. That's the little red pin you see there. And we can just grab a maps URL. Right? Pretty simple, right? It's just a function call away. And then finally, we're going to take the URL and construct a JavaScript object that represents the image widget and return it. So next, we're going to build the zoom buttons. Remember that these zoom buttons are interactive. So in addition to creating the UI side of things, we're going to add a text button which contains a text label. We're going to have an onClick parameter. What's inside the onClick parameter? It's going to be the payload that we want sent back to our bot when the user interacts with one of these buttons. So here we're going to set two parameters. It's going to be the location the user typed in the beginning, and the new zoom level that the user will be taken to when they click the button. So like I said, this object, this payload, is going to be sent back to our bot when the user clicks this button. So where do we receive this payload? We receive it in a function called onCardClick. So just like onMessage, which is triggered when the user sends a message, onCardClick is triggered when the user clicks on a button in a card. So what it receives is the payload of the button that the user clicked. So we can extract the parameters that were assigned to the button. You can see we extract the location, we extract the zoom level. We do a little bit of math to make sure the zoom level isn't out of bounds. And then guess what? We just call the same build message function that constructed the initial card. The only difference is that in this, at this time, we're going to set the parameter to update message, because what we want is not to post a new message, right? We just want to update the original card the user clicked on. So finally, we have the icon on the bottom left that takes the user to Google Maps. So like the zoom buttons, it's going to create a button, but it's not going to have an onClick handler payload that will be returned to the bot, because we don't want the bot to be invoked. We just want to send the user directly to Google Maps. So here we construct a link to Google Maps, and then we attach it to the open link property, which just instructs Hangouts Chat to not deliver the response back to the bot, but just call Google Maps. OK. So I want to stress that while this example shows you how to build this kind of interactivity in AppScript, this functionality is not limited to AppScript, right? The same functionality is available as well if you use your bot, if you build your bot in using an HTTP endpoint or a Cloud PubSub endpoint. So what this really means is that you can build the same rich user experience with cards in a language of your choice and deploy it to the environment of your choice. Cool. So far we've shown you bots that respond to something the user does, right? The user has to send a message or click on a button for your bot to do anything. But what if the bot needs to notify the user about something?
Right. So thanks, Chuan. So the framework supports asynchronous messages, which are perfect for long-running jobs or out-of-band notifications. Asynchronous messages can also be sent to specific threads for context. So here, our bot needs to contact Hangouts Chat, so some all-auth is needed. All right, so when you see OAuth, it's a strong indication you're using an API. So there's no exception here, as our bot has to call into Hangouts Chat now. So this Python sample uses the bot's permission scope, plus the service account credentials that you got downloaded from your API project. And then once you have the credentials, you establish a service endpoint to the API, like you see with the discovery.build call. And then you can use the API to send message to a DM or a room. Now, like any other bot, this bot can call other APIs or could do any other processing that you want to have it done, and then collate the information and then send that back into the room or the DM. All right. More generally, besides just creating messages, the API can do all CRUD operations on messages. It also has additional features to give you more context, like getting information on rooms and DMs, or members who are in rooms and DMs. In addition to the API, Hangouts Chat also supports incoming webhooks. Now, these are great for one-off alerts, like when a server goes down. They're quick and dirty or quick and easy, and you can integrate with any of your custom workflows. And the way you do it is you go to the room with the DM, and you pull down configure webhooks. And then from there, you can see all the current webhooks that are currently defined. And you can have different ones because you may have different apps that are posting different alerts, right? So you just click on the icon to the right to copy the webhook URL to use. Now, incoming webhooks can come from a variety of sources like monitoring apps or even the command line. So Chuan's going to prove this by doing an incoming webhook from a curl command.
All right, thank you, Wes. All right, let's go to the demo. Thank you. So as Wes showed you, the way you configure a webhook is you go to a room, click on Configure Webhooks, and we're going to see a dialog here that shows you the webhooks that you've configured. And you're going to have a URL here that you can use. So in this particular case, to just give some context, let's say we have an imaginary task manager app and it just wants to send a quick notification into Hangouts Chat when something happens. So I'm going to switch to a terminal here. And here you can see I've pasted a command. It's going to be a curl command sending an HTTP post request. It's going to contain a JSON payload. Okay, that's the header here. And it's going to contain the URL I copied from the dialog from in Hangouts Chat in the background. And the text I'm going to send, remember, this is the same payload, the same JSON object that you would send from AppScript or from an HTTP request. It's the same JSON format. So just send it as a payload, and let me hit enter here. And if everything goes well. So you can see here, before we close the terminal, you can see that I've gotten back as a response a JSON formatted payload from Hangouts Chat that shows me, among other things, like the ID of the message that was just created, the space that it was posted in, and so on. So now let's take a look at this message in Hangouts Chat. So you can see here this created a new conversation, right? And it contains the text that we were just sent to it. Cool. Let's go back to the slides. Great. So one of the most innovative features in Hangouts Chat, as Mike explained to you guys earlier, is threaded conversations, right? So threaded conversations are great for grouping relevant context together. So in the context of sort of our imaginary task manager app, what we really like to see is the history around the particular task grouped together, kind of like the top thread you can see here. So what this means is that all the relevant discussions from people, all the relevant notifications from this app get grouped into the same conversation. So it's very easy for people to understand what's going on. So how do we do this? Just like you saw before on my screen, after you send a request to Hangouts Chat, we return the data, the IDs, and so on about the messages created. So you could remember that. You could remember the association between a task ID and the thread ID, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can totally do that. But since this is a really common use case, we thought we could make it more convenient. So one solution we came up with is the idea of a thread key. So you can think of thread key as a custom identifier. It's opaque to Hangouts Chat, but it's some identifier that makes sense to you in your problem domain. So for example, this in our task manager app, it could be a task ID. If you have a customer ticket tracking system, it could be a customer ticket ID, maybe a customer order ID. It doesn't matter. And what you do with it is just specify it in each request that you make when you're creating a message in Hangouts Chat. And we do the heavy lifting. We will remember this. The first time we see a message that has a particular thread key, we'll create a new conversation. Subsequent messages get posted into the same conversation. So now you don't have to remember that mapping between an entity in your problem domain and a thread or a conversation in Hangouts Chat. So of course, this example here on the slide shows you a curl command, which is very simple. But this, of course, doesn't just work for incoming webhooks or from curl. This works for bots as well. So you could write, as a bot and could use thread key to do the same and group messages into the same conversation. All right, so this wraps up our introductory tour of the Hangouts Chat bot framework. I'll hand it off to Mike to take us across the finish line.
Thank you, Wes and Chuan. Just to summarize what we talked about today, so the Hangouts Chat service with bots helps teams accelerate their teamwork and productivity. You can stay notified, automate tasks, query information, all without changing any context. And like they showed you, there's many different ways to connect. You can spin up your own web service using any cloud or language you want. You can use Cloud PubSub to work with a firewall inside your organization. Or the easiest way, if you're building a custom bot to streamline a workflow, is using AppScript, where you don't have to worry about servers, auth, or anything like that. So to get started, check out developers.google.com/hangouts/chat for more documentation on how to actually do all of this. If you're a G Suite customer and you haven't tried Hangouts Chat today, you can go to chat.google.com to try the product itself. And if you have more questions, we're happy to answer them in Dome B. We'll be giving some more demos, and we could show you some more details on how to publish bots and whatnot. So before we all leave, we want to hear from you, so please provide feedback for the session at google.com/io/schedule. And thank you for all coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.